What's happening, people? What's happening, folks? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the home of the Premier League champions, of course. Listen, we're going to be talking on this video about Bruno Guimarães. It's your boy CJ from the Gunner's Corner, of course. I have to introduce myself real quick. Make sure you like and subscribe. Hype the video if you haven't done so already. It really, really does help us out. But yes, make sure you continue to stay here and lock in with us all summer long. We're rolling all the way through the World Cup right into club football and the return of football for next season as Arsenal look to defend their Premier League crown and go one step further in other cup competitions. But yes, how will we go about that? Bruno Guimarães. He's a big player. He can help definitely get us to the glory that we want to get to next season as well. He can definitely help get us to back-to-back Prems. He can definitely help us win the Champions League. I'll tell you that. Bruno Guimarães, what a player he is. This is a player I've looked at for a long time. This is a player that Arsenal have looked at for a long time, to be fair, have wanted for a long time. And I believe we should have gotten him before he went to Newcastle. He was previously at Lyon. And at that time, we were looking at him for one reason or another, we let that slip through the cracks, as we have done with a lot of good targets over the years. And yeah, let that slip through the cracks and allowed him to go to Newcastle instead of coming to the Arsenal. And famously, I think Newcastle and even Bruno himself might have trolled us when they did Bruno's intro video when he signed for Newcastle. You know, we were there. I think there was a video, a clip going around at the time of Bruno reading interest from Arsenal in that video. Um, and kind of, bantering us, taking the piss out of us a little bit, saying, yeah, no, despite that interest from Arsenal, I'm signing for Newcastle essentially. That was all in his intro signing video, people. If you go back, I don't even know if it's still available to look at somewhere, but all that to say, right? Newcastle, Bruno themselves, they took the piss out of us a little bit at the time, saying that pretty much saying that this was one that we were supposed to snatch up, which was true. However, he finds himself in Newcastle's ground and find himself playing football at St. James's Park. And as we've seen over the years, he's been a fantastic signing for Newcastle. He's been one of their standout players. He's the captain, I believe, now for them. He's just coming off the back of, a great season for them individually, at least, because Newcastle didn't perform well as a club, but individually he had a fantastic season. He put out numbers for goals and assists, the best of his career. He's even admitted to that. He's just, the engine. He's basically their Declan Rice. What Declan Rice is to us, he is to them. Just in terms of how much he brings to that team and the noticeable difference when he's not in it. He's box to box, he's everywhere, he's covering every blade of grass, tackling, interceptions, passion, leadership, emotion, quality on the football, right? Let's get that in there. Definitely quality on the football. Brazilian, right? Says everything for you. He's a quality midfield player. He's got everything in the midfield that you'd want in your midfielder. And yeah, he's just, he's carried them through. He's carried Newcastle through for years. He, again, in the times he's played against us, he's been a complete shithouse. He famously could have got sent off for forearming Jorginho in the head. If you guys remember at St. James's Park, VAR, they looked at that and how they didn't, have that reviewed for him to be sent off. I don't know. But anyways, he's just one of those kind of players where he's got that shithouse in him. He's got the dark arts in him. He's one of those players that you'd hate to play against, but you'd love to play with. Absolutely. Um, and yeah, man, Bruno Guimarães, again, me, I have a bias towards my Brazilian players. I follow and support and like Brazil. Hope they go far and win this World Cup even. But yeah, so there's a bit of bias there for why I like Bruno. But again, I think everybody who watches football and watches Premier League football, you've seen Bruno in this league over the years, and you realize that this is a player that would definitely improve Arsenal. And it should have been a player that we got again at that time, whenever it was 3 years ago, 4 years ago, whenever it was that he first signed for Newcastle. We let that slip through the cracks unknowingly. And again, not he wouldn't be the first player that we let slip through the cracks when we had him right in our grasp, essentially. And I say that, but the deal was very much doable at the time, right? We could have got him for a decent price in the market at the time. Don't remember exactly what Newcastle paid for him, but surely it wasn't anything that you're seeing nowadays with the 100 mil, 80 mil, 90 mil for the midfield market nowadays is just ridiculous, right? Bruno at that time wasn't going for that kind of money. He was going for around half of that. Um, and then that would have been he was definitely every worth every penny, as they say, right? When you look at the impact that he's had on Newcastle. And again, I think at that time what he would have done for us. Yes, we had Declan Rice. Yes, we had Partey at the time, But, natural successor, we've been looking for that, midfield partner for Rice for a couple of years now. We knew Partey was fading and getting older at that time. We knew Xhaka was fading and getting older at that time. Bruno, at the time that he would have come in would have been mid 20s, so he still could have been with us and just carrying our midfield alongside Declan Rice now, and that would have been the midfield for years to come. Again, now not too late, right? We can get him now, Bruno. He is 28 going on 29 this year. But for me, again, when you see players that are now playing late into their careers now, when you see players, peaking or even in their prime, well into their 30s, the likes of Granit Xhaka, look at how he's playing and how he's performed. He seems like he's getting better with age, Xhaka, right? So there's certain players that, nowadays in the game, especially depending on what position that you play, you can prolong your career. You can play for a lengthy period of time, especially if your game doesn't revolve around pace. And Bruno Guimarães' game does not revolve around pace. He's well into his prime right now. Again, 28 going on 29. That's not old. Um, he can still play alongside Declan Rice for 3, 4 seasons, even if it's two seasons, right? You think about what we can do in 2 seasons. If he goes on to win trophies with us in 2 seasons, we'll say, yeah, job done, especially if it's the big ones, the big trophies, right? So it's not like you need 5 years out of him. And a lot of people who are talking about resale value, he has no resale value. Like this is nonsense to me. We're Arsenal Football Club. We're not Arsenal, corporate, Arsenal Inc., Arsenal Incorporated, Arsenal Business Club. You know what I mean? We're a football club that we want to have success on the pitch. Yes, I understand that, there's an element of business and, you know, we have to, be able to buy and sell and make the returns and make the profits and all those sort of things. I get that. But listen, that'll come. That comes with success on the pitch as well, as we're seeing this season when we won the Premier League, right? The amount of revenue you can turn in from fans just showing up to, coming from all around the world to come to the Emirates to be part of parades, to go into the Armory. When everyone's in Arsenal's winning and everyone's in a good mood, I'm one of the first people who are vulnerable. I'll be, giving you my credit card details straight away, Arsenal Football Club. You know what I mean? Like I want jerseys, I want kits, I want merch, I want memorabilia. I want all of it, get me to the armory. You know what I mean? So the bottom line is that success on the pitch is also a profitable thing for Arsenal because again, everybody wants to be involved. Everyone wants to, like I said, buy the latest merch and buy kits and come to the Emirates, watch games, watch alongs. Um, you know what I mean? It's just yeah, it's success definitely. I believe definitely as a football club, success and winning will definitely, be good for business from a business standpoint and a business side of things as well. I think just getting to a Champions League final, how much money did that bring in for us? Right? Yes, we didn't win it in the end, but just getting to the final even, I think returned a good amount of revenue and a good amount of dough for us for Arsenal Football Club. So it's things like that, man. It's things like that. You show that ambition, you show that hunger and will to win on the pitch, and the more success you have, you'll benefit all around, on and off the pitch in more ways than one. And so the point is, bringing it back to Bruno, is that it doesn't always have to be about, oh, he has resale value this, resale value that. You forget that resale value stuff. We need him for the time period that he is in his peak, in the peak of his powers, when he's performing at his best, when he just had his best season for Newcastle. We need him now when he's fresh, when he's in his prime and he's in his peak, and he can win us trophies now. Because where Arsenal is right now, the reality of the situation is that Arsenal is in a win now state. There is this feeling that right now we can dominate the Premier League for a few seasons to come. When you see, Man City's in transition, they just got the new manager in. He's a good manager, but he's no Pep Guardiola. So what are they going to look like under the new manager? Man United, the same. They got a new manager in Carrick. Carrick is an amateur manager. What's he going to look like now with Champions League football next season and a full season of managing contracts and players, etc. Chelsea's transitioning, as we know. They just had a horrible season. Xabi Alonso's come in as a new coach, good coach, but again, what is Chelsea going to look like going into the new season? They got a lot of work to do to get back to the top. Spurs are Spurs, and Liverpool again, the same theme, transitioning, right? New manager, a couple players leaving, have left, right? Kanate's gone. Um, so what's Liverpool going to look like? Salah's gone. They have a new manager who's also relatively inexperienced at the highest level, good coach, but similar theme, right? Inexperience in terms of winning pedigree. So yeah, man, it's definitely it's one of those. It's one of those where now is the time where Arsenal, who look like the most settled side, stability, players signing new contracts, players on long contracts, the manager stability, just fresh off the back of winning the Premier League, you got to improve from a power of strength. And right now we're definitely in a power of strength, right? And this is the time where you want to sustain that, right? So players like Bruno Guimarães will definitely help, you know, set what we want, what Arsenal fans want to be is a dynasty, a mini dynasty, right? Why can't we do what Pep and Man City have done over the years? We have to make up for lost time, right? We're a big, massive football club who's been starved of success at the highest level for years. It's time to, get back to winning ways and on a more regular basis. Right? Don't make this be a one-off. We win the Premier League in 2026 and then don't win it again for another number of years. Like that's not acceptable anymore, right? We need to sustain where we're at. And in fact, we need to go one step further. We need to get that star above the badge and finally win the Champions League. Because the people like me now who and all Arsenal fans, to be fair, we're devastated from that final, right? We've now lost two Champions League finals. That's now the one thing that people and rivals and haters will hold over our heads is the fact that we don't have that Champions League, Champions of Europe and all that nonsense. So, um, yeah, man, that's the next step for us. Once we get that, I mean, a club of our size, our fan base, our stature, our history, needs to win the Champions League. We deserve to win that Champions League, in my opinion, right? For the size of the club that we are, and the fan base deserves it more than anything else. I think that's the next step. That's what we're all going to be looking to see, similar to what City did in the sense that once they conquered the country, once they conquered England. It was all about City being that powerhouse to go on and succeed in Europe and win the Champions League, which they did. So I think that's our next step. That's our next natural trajectory. Is yes, you want to continue to win the Prem and maybe go back to back, and that would be historic in itself. Not many teams can do that. But also, you want to now win that Champions League, right? That's the natural trajectory and the process and the project of under Arteta since he's come in. That part of the remit and the visions and the dreams that he had was to take this club to the very top again. And fair play, he's come. You're halfway there in terms of the big two trophies that have Arsenal have been starved of for a while. Um, so you're halfway there. You got the Prem. Now, can you get that Champions League, Arteta, and cement yourself in the club's history as potentially the best manager of all time if you can win the Champions League, right? Um, the best manager in Arsenal's history, I should say, if you can win the Champions League. You'd have an argument for that. We were close this season. We need to go again. We need to improve with established, proven players already who can get us to that next step. Because again, we're not in a phase five, phase six, phase seven where we're building for the future. We're literally in a win now scenario. And yes, these links to young players that Wabi from Morocco midfielder, 18 years old. That's a good signing. That's a good link and a good midfielder if we were to get him in, but that's also still one for the future, right? Um, where we're in win now. Signing a Bruno Guimarães tells me that you do want to win the Champions League next season. You do want to go back to back in the Premier League, and you do want to maybe win other cups as well. That's literally that's the kind of ambition that shows to me, to us, to the fan base, is that you're ready now. You're not building for the future anymore. You're ready to sustain this dominance in the here and now by signing proven players, established players at the highest level, Brazilian international, one of the best midfielders in the Premier League to play alongside another one of the best midfielders in the Premier League in Declan Rice. Bruno Guimaraes and Declan Rice in midfield. Nobody's getting past that, right? Nobody's getting through that midfield. You have power, you have pace, you have intensity, you have tenacity, you have passion, you have technical ability, you have goals, you have assists. You have line breaking passers in Bruno Guimaraes. You now have somebody who can be press resistant and break lines. The creativity, right? He's got goals last season, but also assists, right? The number of assists that he's got. Somebody who can, I think he's already got 3 assists in this World Cup for Brazil. So again, like you said, you have somebody who can create that bit of magic, who can create something out of nothing, who can be that spark. And yeah, man, it's nice to have these links to a player like this, man, because it gets us excited. It's exactly what we want to see. Yes, a lot of us were saying that you don't necessarily need to, um, look first in midfield to improve because of the emergence of Miles Lewis-Skelly, for example, and you still have your Zubimendi's and Mikel Marinos. But this is what I'm talking about in terms of being ruthless, right? You got an upgrade. You got to upgrade from an Odegaard. Sorry, Odegaard. Well, even him as well, maybe, but you got an upgrade from a Norgard, I should say, to someone like Bruno Guimaraes. That's the one in, one out that we're looking to see. Yes, keep those other guys around him, but why can't you bring in a Bruno Guimaraes and make space for him by dumping out Norgard? With all due respect to him, thanks for coming, Norgard, but clearly you're not fancied. The manager didn't fancy him last season. Um, but what a signing of Bruno Guimaraes would do is it wouldn't only allow for a midfield pivot of Rice and Bruno, but it would also help. It would give Rice a rest because as we're seeing, like many people are not seeing into the future with this, but Rice is we're in jeopardy of you know having Rice under the needle essentially, or having Rice be be the victim of serious injuries because of how much we're playing him and how much he's being run into the ground, Declan Rice. I mean, the guy's played almost every game last season, run it right into the ground. And, he's playing for England right now. He's barely having a rest. We're seeing and hearing, things about little niggles and little injuries and muscular injuries that he's been picking up because of the result of overplaying and fatigue. He himself came out and said he's been nursing something, a muscular situation since Christmas, essentially. The guy's been running to the ground, and I've said this many times. My beef with the manager is how much he's overplayed players, your likes of Saka's, your Timbers. Saka was once upon a time, a machine, never got injured. But again, the human body will eventually wear and tear if it's overused, if he's been overplayed, and that's exactly what we're seeing with Saka now, and it's sad, and I think that's because of the manager. And so I think a similar thing can happen to Declan Rice if we're not careful, to be honest with you. We cannot afford to have Rice play the number of minutes that he played this season going into next season. So he's going to need somebody like a Bruno Guimarães to come in and steady the ship and not only play alongside him, but also play instead of him because, as I said, Rice is going to need a rest, and obviously Norgard, the level just drops significantly if you replace Rice with Norgard. Bruno Guimaraes is a more than competent level replacement for a Rice. If Rice is ever out of the side, you can drop Bruno in there, and he'll hold down the midfield. Because currently, with our current midfield setup, as a team as we have right now, and as a good of players right now we have there in midfield, right? Your Zubimendis, your Marinos, and even Lewis Skelly now. Without Rice, the midfield falls apart, in my opinion. And I say it falls apart, but if you want to compete again at the highest level, right, in the biggest of games, if you don't have Declan Rice, we're in trouble. I don't see us winning a Champions League without Declan Rice. I don't see us winning a Premier League without Declan Rice. He's the engine, he's the driving force. He's got the attributes that no other midfielder in our team has. If you bring in a Bruno Guimaraes, you will get a like for like replacement, as I mentioned. You will get that adequate replacement. Somebody who, again, has the ability to cover every blade of grass, can get across the pitch, who's a fantastic tackler, who can drive the team forward with dribbling. You know, Marino is, again, we know he's slower. Zubimendi's smaller in stature, right? Doesn't have the same pace and physicality as Declan Rice. Um, so it's a Bruno Guimaraes is literally the Brazilian version of Rice, in my opinion. Like I said, just in terms of attributes, in terms of what he brings to the team. Again, leadership as well. That's another one I didn't mention. Leadership, along with the tenacity, the aggression, the power, the passion, the pace, the tackling ability, and then obviously the contributions in the final third. So yeah, man, I think that's the direction you got to go in if you're Arsenal Football Club. Bruno Guimaraes would be the perfect signing, and it would be the win now signing for me. It would be the signing that says, we're trying to win the majors again, and we're going to continue to sustain this for a few years to come. That's the level that we're trying to get to. Um, and yeah, Bruno Guimaraes absolutely does that as far as I'm concerned. It's going to be a tough one to do if we're going to get it done because, as I said, this is something that we should have done 3, 4 years ago, whenever Bruno first went to Newcastle. That's when we should have got him in. Again, it's not too late, but you made it more difficult for yourself now because you're now going to have to pay double the price. Likely, Newcastle's going to play hardball. Um, we're any chance of this happening is going to be because Bruno himself and his people are going to push for the move. That's where I see it being a possibility. He's got 2 years left on his contract, I believe. If he doesn't re-sign, Bruno, then you know they're risking, you're going to get all, with 1 year left on the contract. If he doesn't re-sign and he plays next season with Newcastle, and but next year this time with 1 year left on his contract, you're not going to get the same sort of value for him then than what you would now. So if he's not going to re-sign, and for Newcastle, you think, okay, cash in now because now his value is where you're going to get the max out of any potential sale. So yeah, now is the time if you're Newcastle to cash in if Bruno doesn't want to re-sign, to be honest with you. And I think, Bruno, again, pushing for that move, I think that's the way that this gets done for us because you don't want an Isak situation or a Gyökeres situation, or you don't want a situation where a player is staying at a club and he's unhappy and he's not going to give his best and he's not re-signing either um, as his contract is winding down. So what do you do as a club? You gotta cash in, you would think, right? And it depends. It's going to be interesting to see what kind of Bruno we're going to see when he returns from the World Cup, and how he's going to react with Newcastle if they deny him of this move, right? Is he going to, down tools, and is he going to, you know, I don't know. Like, is he gonna be like I said, what Gyökeres did and Isak did, and refuse to train and refuse to play, and force that move? Are you going to will it risk ruining that relationship that you have with the fans? And because the fans have taken to Bruno really well, they love him. Bruno's embraced Newcastle and the club and the culture and the history of that club. Himself. He calls himself a Geordie and all that. He's a captain, so yeah, you risk ruining that relationship definitely with the fans. But again, players have short careers. He's got to think of his career. Newcastle, he's Bruno's done all he could do for that club. Newcastle had a poor season last season. They should have kicked on. They were in the Champions League. This season they finished nowhere near it. I think they finished 12th. Poor season. So Bruno, again, he's going to be thinking, well, it's not, this is my career. Newcastle as a club, if they were ambitious, if they were still winning trophies, off the back of winning the League Cup, I think it was last year. If they finished in the Champions League spot or if they were contending for trophies, then yeah, why would Bruno want to leave? But again, at 28, 29 years of age, he's good enough to be playing for a team that's competing for top honors, which is the Arsenal. And that's what Bruno's going to want to do. These are players that have short careers at the end of the day. And yeah, man, I think it would be wise of him to do from a personal standpoint. But hey, there's obviously a little bit of bias in there as far as I'm concerned. Listen, man, it's not too late. It's a deal we should have done years ago. We were warned at the time. We didn't listen. Edu, for one reason or another, when Edu was around, I'm not blaming it all on Edu, but whoever was involved at that time, Edu, Arteta, the club, just didn't show enough ambition at that time to go and get the deal done. We let that slip, and we let him come to the Premier League and let him go to a Newcastle when he would have been perfect for us. But he still could be perfect for us. Because we still can sign him now. We've seen him what he can do in the Premier League proven player, and we can get him at his peak while we're at our peak as a club when we're, at that ceiling of, where we're just trying to break through that next layer at the ceiling of, you know, dominance, of dynasty, of winning in Europe. And Bruno's a player who can go help us push through that ceiling, break that ceiling, that glass ceiling, as they say, to get over the line in the Champions League, to again, go back to back in Premier Leagues, win doubles, etc. He's that kind of player, Premier League proven. It's just a match made in heaven for a team that's on the up, or a club that's on the up in Arsenal Football Club, and a player who's, at the peak of his powers in Bruno at a proper age, experienced and the likes. So yeah, man, I'm all for it. I hope we can get it done personally. I think that's a big sign of intent from us. And I think it's a big statement to the league when you have, again, if you were to have a Bruno and a Rice playing together, two of the best midfielders in the Premier League, again, on one team, that's the kind of ambition that we're talking about. That's what Man City's of the past will do. That's what Chelsea's of the past will do. Man United's of the past will do. Something similar when they took Van Persie from us, right? They were at the peak of their powers, United. They were close to winning the Premier League. I think they had lost out the season before. They went and got Van Persie. And then they went and got Van Persie the next season. And what did they do? They went from second to first, won the league. Obviously, Fergie bowed out on a high. And yeah, Van Persie was at an age, just coming out the back of the best season that he had in the Premier League with us at the time, did put up the numbers. He was 29, I think, at the time. How did that work out for them? They didn't care that they signed a 29-year-old. They wanted to go and win the trophies. They won the Premier League. And Van Persie, was still balling at the peak of his powers for them as well. Sucks happened to us, but we can go now. We're now that team. We can now go and do it to other teams. Let me take your best player out of your team. You guys underperformed. You guys were underwhelming. Let me take your best player in a Bruno Guimarães, you know, 28, 29 years old, at the peak of his powers, in his prime. He can give us his best years. He can help us win the biggest trophies and continue to have that sustainability and dominance. And dynasty is the word that we're using right now. Because yeah, maybe we get carried away as Arsenal fans, but that's what we're looking to do now, man. This is our time. We have to make up for years of lost time, man. We were in the mud. We were down bad for years, but now it feels like it's our time, man. Let's give that back to the fans. Let's put this club where it should be and where it needs to be, back on the map, back on top, and including back on top, or finally getting on top in Europe, because that's what this club deserves, as far as I'm concerned. So listen, let me know what you guys think, how you feel about the Bruno Guimaraes signing. Is he too quote unquote old, or is this just the right time to get him? Should we have gotten him years ago, before he went to Newcastle? I think the collective answer would be yes. But let me know your thoughts in and around this player. Would you want him at the club? Is it a good signing? Does it make sense? And what levels he can take us to? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Drop a like, subscribe to the channel. Most importantly, as we always say, it really helps us out, and we really do appreciate it. I've been CJ from the Gunners Corner. I hope y'all continue to enjoy the World Cup. Keep it locked here for videos upcoming, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Take care, y'all. Bye bye.